Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. On Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Welcome to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Linda Joy, Mindset Elevation Coach, publisher of the beloved Aspire magazine since 2006. And I'm excited to share a big announcement that the rumors are true. I have stepped back into producing live 2-day inspirational event for women, and it's coming April 11th and 12th, 2026 to Quincy, Massachusetts. It is the Inspired Life Women's Weekend of Love, Light, and Laughter. 50 vendors, pamper room, 50 workshops, and so much more. If you want those details and to get notified as things unfold, please go to inspiredlifeevent.com. So today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics because it's related to joy. And I am so excited because with me today is Nichole Smith, also known as Nick. So she is the host of the Joy First podcast. Doesn't the name just pull you in? And founder of Joy First Creative Agency, which offers joy makeovers to humans and brands. She's an expert in marketing, design, and color psychology and has spent nearly 20 years helping people create lives and brands that center on joy. Her work's been featured in USA Today, Real Simple, Condé Nast Traveler, and she's won numerous awards, including the prestigious European Product Design Gold Award. As you'll discover, Nick's passion is to activate more joy, color, and positive impact in the lives and businesses of everyone she meets. You can learn more at joyfirstworld.com. Nick, welcome.
Thank you. What a wonderful introduction. Thank you.
Well, we were chatting prior to recording, ladies, and I said to Nick, I go, "Oh my God, this is going to be such a fun conversation." One, I'm a creative and I'm a visionary, so color's always been important to me. I was one of those people like 35 years ago that had color analysis done, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
know things have changed and morphed so much since then. But I love your mission because one of your statements was, what if instead of living in a world ruled by hustle and fear, we chose joy first? And that really just, I was like, yes, this is what all my brands are about. So
Mm.
I always love to ask my clients, like, there's usually a personal story that led them to the work they're doing. Is that the case for you? Was there a moment when you knew this is who you are and what you want to do?
Yeah, I would say, like many of our stories, it's a culmination of moments. And when I, do work around purpose or brand and I look back, I always sort of describe it as like the breadcrumbs. And the breadcrumbs for me are so obvious when you look back. But when I was on my journey, the obvious thing wasn't joy. I started my career in the pet industry. And so as a photographer and a graphic designer, I was um, building brands and doing photography for pet owners and pet businesses. And what I didn't realize at that time was this seed of joy-centered branding, joy-centered marketing, being able to kind of sell the good life rather than just, use fear tactics to sell. I didn't understand how unique and special that was. I didn't understand what a gift it was and what a joy it was to be in a market where there was just so much love and there was so much happiness. And I had this service business, but I also started with some co-founders a lifestyle brand. So we started a t-shirt sort of gift apparel company in 2006. And what we realized really, really quickly was we weren't selling stuff. What we were selling was the way it feels to be with your dog. And for an early 20 something, this was such an incredible lesson that I definitely carried with me as I expanded into working with a lot of hospitality and coaches and online businesses thereafter. But I would say the biggest seed was planted probably when I was a college dropout who adopted a Great Dane and found myself in the pet industry.
Oh, that's funny. So your pet led you to your path.
She absolutely did. Yeah, I knew I loved animals and I thought I was going to have to be a veterinarian because I had that same story that so many of us get, sold when we're young that we don't want to be a starving artist. So I wanted to work with animals, but I didn't want to be poor. So I thought I would need to be a veterinarian, and I had the luck and joy of working at a vet clinic from about 8th grade through my senior year in high school. And thank thanks to that vet, she sat me down and I had started to take pictures of the animals in the clinic where I worked. And she was saying, you're not going to have time for photography in vet school. And I was like, oh, sure, I will, in between my electives and stuff. And she was like, no, all your electives, they're going to be math and science. And it really struck me that I didn't even really like math and science that much. I was about to step into this whole career based on something I didn't really enjoy. And having the lived experience of working at the clinic, I also understood the day to day of that life. And it's really challenging. And I luckily got to avoid that whole first career before I even started, and really decided I was going to make a go of it, as a photographer and as a designer. And I'm forever grateful for that.
Yeah, you know what that tells me too, Nick, is you had a strong intuition even at a young age, right? Because you didn't get caught up in the shoulds and have tos of following a path that really wasn't designed for how you're wired. Do you feel that today?
Yeah, 100%. I was lucky. I did have a supportive family and lots of entrepreneurs in my family. And also, I had a few of those little gorgeous sort of signs. And I don't know if you believe in coincidences, but I don't. And so, one of the things that happened at the same time is I took one of those college aptitude tests that, we took back in the day. And
Yes.
the only career that matched up for me was photographer. And I was like, well, there you go.
Whoa, so your beginning years was all photography and it went from pets into other industries. And then did you bring your graphic design skills into that work also?
Yeah, so when I ended up going to art school, and I ended up having to drop out because I just couldn't afford it anymore. So I decided to start my business. And so in art school, there is no photography degree at the school I was at. So I was in a design degree, which is what allowed me to kind of dive into photography as well. And so I just started, and I started, yeah, doing photography and graphic design straight away, which led me to having a lot more of an edge into the commercial world instead of just the private client world, which ended up being a tremendous gift. So I grew a tremendous amount of clout and credibility in that space over about a decade, where I worked with, major multinational corporations, and I was in every magazine and speaking at trade shows, and, building up our multi-million dollar lifestyle brand as well at the same time as doing this wonderful creative work. So it was a really incredible ride, and I was so grateful for it. But then in 2012, I met this guy, and he happened to be British living in London, and I happened to be living in LA, and one of us was going to have to move. So it ended up being me. And that started a whole new stage of the journey.
I always love hearing about women's stories because I always believe in many ways we're being led to our path as long as we can stay present and listen. And now look at you today. You're a branding and color psychology expert on a mission to co-create a joy-first world. And today we're going to go to our first break in a few minutes, but we're going to be talking about diving into the science of joy and color psychology in practical ways to prioritize joy in your life. And as I shared at the beginning, this is one of my favorite topics. And I love that you found your path so young. Like you said, you didn't have to go through that first career, like, oh my God, what did I do? That's
Yeah.
major.
Yeah, I feel really grateful for that. And also, I think that's part of what has led me to this joy work is that I have taken these joy first decisions since the very beginning in my life, and they were big and scary and probably ill-advised in many cases. But it has turned out to be one of the things that has led me to where I am, and also one of the things I've supported my clients with over the years that has made such a big impact for them.
Yeah, and think of the ripple effect too. You're working with companies and individuals, and the ripple effect of when they tap into joy and their brands express joy and their messaging and the whole thing, there's a ripple effect.
Yeah, we should definitely dive into that next.
Oh, yeah, because I'm all about the ripple effect, girl. So we're going to take a quick break, my friends, and we'll be back in a moment. I'm with Nichole Smith, known as Nick. You can learn more at joyfirstworld.com. We'll be back in a moment.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Are you struggling to grow your mission-driven business in a way that feeds your soul and fulfills your purpose? When you discover your unique human design and divine blueprint, you'll feel empowered in your business, aligned with your inner wisdom, and open to the flow of abundance and success. Nancy O'Keefe is a certified human design specialist and intuitive business coach, successfully coaching entrepreneurs for over 25 years. She is passionate about helping you understand your divine design and your personal formula for success. She knows what it takes after creating her own multi-seven-figure firm. Nancy helps women peel back the layers of who they've been taught to be to reveal who they truly are, so they can build an abundant and sustainable business that feeds their soul. Schedule your complimentary call today at nancyokeefecoaching.com.
Consistently attract soulmate clients, begin showing up on brand, monetizing on your calling. Welcome all spiritual coaches, leaders, healers, light workers, and practitioners to a show that turns you on in your business and amplifies your magnetism. I'm host, catalyst, and spiritual business coach Rosalind Fung, and I'm here to journey with you into the juicy and help you discover where the real gaps are. Ignite your mindset and soul with strategies and systems as each episode takes you to the sweet spot that activates your soulgasmic business by tuning in on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Mountain. Join me for your light language activation, and let's magnetize and monetize.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I am so happy that you're circling up with myself and my special guest, Nichole Smith, host of the Joy First podcast and founder of Joy First Creative Agency. So right before we went on break, I was talking about, like, I could energetically see this ripple effect because you followed Joy First and made those initial decisions way back. And now here you are bringing everything that you know as, a branding and color psychology expert into the work with clients. It has to create a ripple effect. Like your Joy First methodology, or I guess you would say your framework and everything you do, it just continues to ripple out. Have you found that to be true in your clients' work?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things I cherish so much about working with what I call joy centered. You could call it heart led or purpose driven brands and businesses. Again, mostly women in my world as well. And what's amazing about that is there are no shortage of entrepreneurs or big-hearted people who want to make a positive difference in the world. And I think there is something incredibly magical about when you can align, like we were talking about before we started recording, when you can align that, getting paid for good work with that incredible purpose and finding that, reason for waking up in the morning that gets you so excited and inspired. It's such a mystical, magical combination because you are able to create that ripple effect, but you also are able to, avoid burnout and, maintain your health and your relationships and, not get sucked into that hustle culture that can be so toxic when especially, you quit a job to start a business and then think that, it's going to be all smooth sailing, and you find out actually it's really hard and like the biggest personal growth journey of your life. So I definitely see that ripple effect, and it's really interesting. I know we'll dive deeper into color, but just being more intentional with color in your own life is one of those things that creates a tremendous ripple effect of joy in particular. And that is something I continue to be surprised about with our clients, because I've been doing that work for a lot less time than the branding. And I'm in such more intimate conversations with the people having these experiences around making intentional choices around color and how it absolutely transforms their life, their self-image, how they bring themselves to the world and how people react to them. And that does create what we call upward spirals, which is this contagious joy that people can't help catching when they're around you, when you walk into the room, when they're sat at the table, or, in the same space. It is contagious. And that is so exciting and beautiful to me.
Truly is. And I love how you explain that too. And one of the things is everyone in my circle, I call them, we embrace intentional businesses. So you're speaking my language. We are soul-led, spirit-led, heart-centered. Most of us are spiritual entrepreneurs, coaches, and more. And we're so tired of the hustle and grind. Like I started the feminine model back for branding, for messaging, sorry, way back 20 years ago because I got caught up in that hustle and grind. And I remember it cost me my joy. It cost me my authentic voice in my business, right?
Yeah.
We we lose ourselves in the hustle and grind or trying to fit into a branding, marketing, or messaging model that's really the antithesis of who each of us are. Have you found that with your clients that come to you, whether corporate or these more intimate personal clients, that they're like, I've kind of forgotten why I started this business. I've lost my spark. Do you want to
Yeah,
speak to that?
I definitely do see that. And it's it's really interesting because we've had so many experiences with our clients where they've had that first career, the corporate career that they didn't really want. I end up working with a lot of creatives who, were lawyers or accountants, and now they're starting a photography business because they felt the same way I did, but they had different circumstances that led them into a career they didn't really want, but, felt like the responsible thing to do. I burned out before I was 30 because of the circumstances that I was facing when I was young. And I think, once you go through that, you sort of learn that it's just, it's just not worth it. Right. I think the other thing that feels very true for me in particular right now is I really feel like in the world, we are facing a tremendous joy crisis. And I think I'm being called to, bring this mission to the front and be louder about it because we really, really need it right now. And I think of every single person I've talked to in the last probably 18 months, there's a solid head nodding agreement to that, to what we're experiencing in the world right now, which can feel really dark and really heavy. And I truly believe that joy is our resistance and our medicine and our ability to, continue to live a life that fulfills us while all this stuff we don't have control over is going on. Um, yeah, so I think, it's complicated. And when you get into the marketing, obviously, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist. So my angle on joy is really as this marketing insider. And, when I moved to the UK, I was able to do a master's degree in marketing. And it was so eye-opening because my first decade of entrepreneurship was self-taught, self-led, and then I did the official, high-level school, and I was just like, wow, the way they teach marketing, the way agencies and multinationals are doing marketing is so gross.
Yes.
And it's so fear-based. And so, really understanding the power of fear, the way we are sold to and what we are sold and why we buy, it really does encourage you to, well, me anyway, and the people in my circle, I imagine in your circle too,
Yes.
you become really resistant to that and you want to find a better way. And so one of the things I've always advocated for is how to sell with joy, with love, instead of, as you say, getting sucked into a lot of those very masculine, war-based, fear-driven tactics that do work. They work really, really well. I'm not saying they don't, but for most of the people I work, they're just not aligned, and they struggle to ever embrace marketing because they don't want to do it that way, and they're waiting for someone to show them a different way.
Oh my God, this is the conversation I have like so many times with my clients. I, it's that masculine manipulative model, like let's poke them in the pain, right?
Yeah,
And where the feminine model that I teach is all about, let's show them possibility.
absolutely.
Let's show them what's on the other side of this transformation that the client is, putting in front of them. And for me, because I was caught up, because I didn't know any better, I'm self-taught too. I was a welfare mom and got off welfare back in, God, end of early 90s and opened my first business and kept that for 10 years, grew it substantially, and then went on the spiritual path and started Aspire almost 20 years ago. But in that time, because I was self-taught, you kind of look around like, okay, this is what others are doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna learn and I'll use that model. And what happened, because I didn't trust myself at that time because of my background, I believe now and that this happens to many entrepreneurs. They see what others are doing and think it's meant for them without tapping into their own divine essence, voice, truth. And I didn't have that language then, Nick, but I see now that when I lost my authentic voice, when I lost the joy in that other business, it was because I was trying to be or fit into what I wasn't. It's not how I'm wired. I'm here for joy, love, inspiration, spreading inspiration. And once I got that, everything shifted. So
Mm.
you must do a lot with your clients about authenticity, right? Because that's the key, I think, to really connecting with people. Does that come up in your work, helping them uncover their authentic voice?
It does in its own roundabout way. I would say the center for me has been more around purpose, and the way that finding our authentic voice has shown up has really been through a process I call why finding, which is using a combination, basically getting all the mess out of your head and putting it into language, and then being able to organize that language into something that starts to create ideal client, product offering, methodology. Because I really feel like while I don't really subscribe to like everyone's here for one purpose and you have to find and go out and find that one purpose or your life is a waste, I feel like that's so it puts people into such high levels of anxiety. I think we can have a lot of different reasons that we're here and purposes that we can follow, but I do feel like, and it sounds like you're totally on the same page, that our early developmental experiences, that pain in particular often does shape in us a passion for a certain person or a certain situation that we are really passionate about helping, serving. Um, and what I have seen in my clients, because I work with a lot of really, really high level clients who are, now operating 7 and 8 figure businesses. And there comes a time where, and it sounds like it might be reflective of your journey as well, where you start your business in that proving mode, right? It's fear driven. You've got to prove something to someone or everyone, yourself, your parents, like the professor who said you couldn't do it, whoever. And that proving energy is really fear driven, but it's also very powerful. So a lot of people can get, build a lot of success that way, and then you get that emptiness at the top where either you are really bored of your business or it doesn't resonate with you, or I've had clients where they're like, I'm just ready to shut it all down, making, millions and millions every year. Because they're looking for something else, because the proving is done, right? They've ticked every single box they can tick. And that's where purpose starts to become really, really important, because they're looking for something deeper. They're looking for something more meaningful. And to your point, authentic to them, right? Authentic to
Yeah.
their voice, authentic to their passion, authentic to what they feel they can stand up and shout about, and the ways that they want to serve. And so I call it the what now moment. And, people come at it in different ways at different times. But I think when you're in that what now movement, that's a time and a place to double down on what I would describe as purpose. And that's my route to that authenticity. And then the other route is we use a lot of psychology, personality types and archetypes in our brand. And sometimes I've found for people who do feel especially stuck in that question around who am I and what's it all about? What's it all for? That existential crisis can be so paralyzing that sometimes having a framework like archetypes, like personality types, can be really helpful to just build a structure that you can lean on that feels like you, and fill that gap with something where you can be, what we describe as psychologically consistent, where you can find language and emotional resonance that you can speak to, that does resonate with you. It resonates with your audience and allows you to be very, very consistent without having to have it all figured out.
I love that. And I love how you lead with the purpose, because for me, that is authenticity. You just come at it from purpose first. But for me, it's the same in regard to, I figured out my purpose in everything I went through in my early years was to prepare me for everything I'm doing now for the last 20
Yeah.
years.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, I see now. And
exactly.
I work with women, right? Women on the path of self-discovery, or women spiritual entrepreneurs. And that's my purpose. My way of doing it may differ because I have 5 media brands. It may differ, but my purpose is only one thing, and that's to inspire, empower, and support women and live in a more intentional and aligned life. Basically, living from the inside out instead of the outside in, which is, we might be using different language, but it sounds like that's what you're talking about too, is helping people bring their branding and marketing to a place that draws them in instead of pushes them away with that fear-based marketing. Would that be accurate?
Yeah. Yeah. I think we are speaking the same language, and there's so many routes. I'm writing a book right now called Joy First. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah,
And,
I was just
uh, a big part of that book is to create this invitation to invite everyone into the Joy First revolution. And everyone's got a voice, and everyone's got a path, and everyone's got a community to bring to this sort of. I was not sure about the word revolution at first because it felt possibly a little bit violent, but I think it is revolutionary. It is unbelievably, surprisingly radical to talk about putting joy first and to use that as a tool to create massive change. So, yeah, I want to invite everyone on that joy first revolution, in whatever your gifts, whatever your authentic voice is. I think now is the time.
Well, it is definitely the time. That's why after a big decade-long hiatus, I'm bringing back that 2-day event that I spoke about, because we need to gather, we need to be in a circle of joy and love, inspiration, peace. And that's my way of adding to that world. And I love the word revolution, but I understand. But something, I wrote it down as you were speaking. I'm like, I can see it being part of the cover, and you highlight the word love in there, which is spelled backwards, of course. And I've seen that done, and then it reminds people that we're on a revolution to love and joy. So we're going to take our next break, Nick, and we'll be back in a moment. We're going to talk some more, ladies, about color psychology and so much more. So stay with us, and you can learn more about everything that Nick is bringing to the world at joyfirstworld.com. And don't worry, everything will be in the show notes too. We'll be right back.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
You don't have to identify as a creative to reap the benefits of a daily creativity practice. Even 15 minutes a day offers a wealth of benefits to your emotional, physical, social, and spiritual well-being. As a natural-born teacher and facilitator, Cindy Winsell consciously merges her 35 years as an educator with her in-depth training as a certified creative depth coach, certified Zentangle teacher, soul collage facilitator, journey circles facilitator, and moon circles guide to empathically and joyfully guide women to tap into their creativity through expressive arts as tools for healing and transformation. Cindy works with women ready to step into creative exploration as a tool for healing. Together, you will develop your own exciting insights and approaches that will help you awaken to possibility. Visit cindywinsell.com for creative classes and more.
If I could be you,
and you could be me for just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out, and for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Host your show on IOM FM the radio network of Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Times. Hosting a show on FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. Times Radio. FM.
You're listening to Inspired Conversations. Thanks for circling up with us today. With me, I should say, is Nichole Smith from joyfirstworld.com. She's the host of the Joy First podcast, the upcoming book by the same name, and founder of the Joy First Creative Agency. So let's talk about color psychology, because is color psychology different from color analysis? I think it's deeper than color analysis, correct?
Yeah, so it is a different thing, but I would say they're like cousins.
I just wanted to ask because I think we've all heard that phrase color analysis for decades. So let's go back. What is color psychology?
Well, if you really simplify it, color psychology is really just about the ways that color impacts our behavior and what happens in our body when we perceive color.
Okay. And then, so in the research and everything, every color has a way of touching people energetically as well as visually.
Yeah, so just, color is light, and I find the science of color actually really boring, so I won't dive into it. But basically, color is light. So without light, you don't have any color, which you know, because in the dark, there's no color. And so obviously we perceive light, we perceive color through our eyes, and then there is a process by which our mind and our body and our nervous system reacts to that stimuli. And one of the most fascinating facts I learned when I started learning about color like a decade ago was that it is the number 2 most powerful thing that we perceive as human beings. The first one is motion. So you can imagine if out of the corner of your eye you see something moving, that's going to be the most alerting for your system, right? It's going to be like, oh, that's moving. I better look at it and find out if it's a snake or a spider or my kid, am I in danger or not? But color is second only to movement in terms of our ability to interpret danger, fertile ground for planting, being able to read people in their facial expressions and, things like blushing. So it's a really powerful part of our world. And I think it's amazing to me that we're never taught about it, given how impactful it is in our environment, in our wardrobe, in our offices. And so at a baseline, color psychology is, when we say psychology, we mean this is an unconscious process, which means it is basically true for pretty much all humans around the globe. I'm right now digging into more research around, neurodivergence and what this means if you're not neurotypical, which I'm not. But if we talk about the sort of average normal human brain, whether you live in China or America, it's going to have the same impact on us. And the basis is there are psychological primary colors, just like there are primaries that we were taught in school, and they are very similar. So there's red, yellow, blue, and in psychology, there's also green is a primary. And red impacts us physically, blue impacts us mentally, yellow impacts us emotionally, and green is sort of this restful, peaceful, balanced space where we kind of get to relax from the stimuli.
Oh, I love that. And as soon as you said green being restful, I have like a sage in my office, so I wanted that peaceful experience. So I have a question. Let's go back to color analysis, because I can remember way back when, I'm aging myself, doing I think it was called Four Seasons. It was like, oh yeah, I'm a winter. So is there any truth to this Four Seasons, the theory behind color?
100% there is. Yeah.
Okay.
So again, trying to oversimplify it, basically, and I think this probably is also speaking your language, but like when we look at the world, we see lots of patterns, right? We see things repeated over and over again. And so if you think about the way light works in a day, We have dawn, morning, noon, afternoon, evening, night. And the way light works in a year in the seasons, spring, summer, autumn, winter, you see a pattern there that dawn in the morning is much like spring, and the midday is much like summer, and then we have that late afternoon golden glow is much like autumn, and then we have that night, that starkness, and is much like winter. So these patterns repeat, and the theory goes that the patterns repeat in us as well, that we reflect these same patterns and systems. And so if you were to break all people down into 4 groups, these groups would be based on really basic Jungian psychology. So you're looking at an axis of introversion, extroversion, and intensity, basically. So it's kind of the same stuff that MBTI is built on, but just really, really oversimplifying, breaking people down into 4 groups. Color can also be broken down into 4 groups, and those would be colors that are reflective of those seasons that you described. These, warm light colors are like spring, these cold blue-based colors are like winter. And what the research has found is that there is an incredibly statistically relevant correlation between the preferences of one group and one color group. So winter people have a tendency to prefer winter colors, if that makes sense. And so when you look at the science of it, what we see is that if we are, so obviously for me coming from branding, if I look at this from a branding standpoint, if I want to create a brand that has a more predictable impact on a website or on product packaging, the way I do it is I would give it a personality type. Are they a spring type, a summer type, a winter type? And what does that mean about the colors we should be using and the colors we should not be using in order to create a harmonious environment? And the thing that I think is really interesting, if you go and look on Google at color psychology, you'll find one of 1,000 infographics with, logos of companies saying blue is trust and red is, desire and yellow is happiness or whatever. Those things are true. There is a half truth in that. But the conversation that you don't see as much in color psychology is this conversation around the personality types and these groups of color and the harmonious environment that group creates versus a blue, for example, from a different group or a green from a different group. Because when you're looking at those infographics, it doesn't say what blue are we talking about. Are we talking about sky blue? Are we talking about navy blue? Are we talking about cobalt blue? They're very different blues and they have a very different impact on us. Is it soothing? Is it stimulating? How can we say this means trust if we don't even know what blue we're talking about? So I think the basis of color psychology is really interesting. The world I work in is called applied color psychology, which is the crossover between all that behavior stuff we talked about and these personality types, which I would say there is a really strong correlation with the color analysis you mentioned. Now, these days, there's a lot of different color analysis. There's a 12 group and a 16 group and a 27 group analysis where these seasons are broken down further. But I think there is a lot of truth in all of them and in the 4 seasons in particular. However, the caveat I will say is as I've looked more deeply into several of these sort of color analysis programs, I find that they don't all operate within what the sort of science would designate as those color groups. There's a lot of made up color groups, I guess. So there is a lot of truth in it. And I think it does bring people a lot of joy. This is definitely something we explore in our work. But for me, we can't just have the conversation around aesthetic. It can't just be based on our skin tone and what we look like and our hair color. We have to also bring in the conversation around personality. How do we feel? How do we want to be perceived? How do we feel most self-expressed? Because oftentimes there isn't a perfect match between the group that the color analysis person told me I was in and the way I want to express myself in the world. So there has to be a meeting of the two and finding ways that we can create color harmony so that we get the benefits of that without having to leave our authentic personality behind.
Ooh, I love this because before we go to the next break, it just reminded me. Here's a question for you, and we have like a minute for this one. Can someone, I don't like the word outgrow colors, because if it's based on the energy we want to perceive personally in our business, The reason I asked that is about, I don't know, 15 years ago, my brand colors were all the upper chakra colors. I don't know why I was drawn to that, but the cobalt blue, the deep purple, the fuchsia, and I loved it until one day, you don't often visit your own website because you're so busy with everyone else's, right?
Yep.
I went there, Nick, and all of a sudden it was such a visceral, like, this is not me. It was as if I had outgrown or evolved. Has that happened?
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's
Yeah.
a lot of reasons that would happen. So I would say, um, you know, if we're talking about brand versus our aesthetic, what do we look like versus our personality type, all of those things are changing, right? And while I would say there are some things that are fairly set, for me, when I do the why finding, there are a few of those things that are unlikely to change for people. There's, when we work with archetypes, there are one or two archetypes that are unlikely to move, while the third is totally movable, depending on what we're selling or where we're living, or, we are creatures of change, right? So I think that is definitely true. I think what would be really interesting is to think about, especially for your listeners who maybe have had this experience, is as you dive into it, maybe doing some journaling on it, was it the fact that all of a sudden it felt too bright and you wanted it more subdued? Was it all of a sudden it felt too cold and you wanted it warmer? Because there's so many different levels on which we sort of look at and analyze color, and so many, decisions we can make about how to proceed in a way that feels more authentic for us based on whatever that too muchness is. So for me, thinking about the personality types, if you go to my website, you can take a quiz where you can find your personality type. And it is based on those seasons, but I don't use the language around the seasons because I find it quite confusing. For example, the colors that are in summer don't often resonate with people as what they think of when they think of summer. Those are more generally spring colors. And so I have created my own names, which are Sunshine, Seaside, Fireside, and Starshine. And those are more evocative names that sort of sound and feel like those color groups and those personality types, the energy of those types would actually come across. And what I have found is that we are often very heavily in one type with a strong secondary type, which influences whether the colors are light or dark, or warmer or cooler, or brighter or less contrasty. But it influences a lot of other things, especially when we're talking about brand or home decor or our wardrobe, things like texture, things like shape, things like, lightness or shininess. Are all part of our preferences within those personality types. And once you can zero in on the type and the combination of types, then it gives you a really strong roadmap for how you can move forward to create spaces, to create brands, to create a wardrobe, to create any kind of environment that involves color that feels deeply, deeply aligned.
I love this deep conversation, and I want to invite everyone, if you're interested in taking the quiz, go to joyfirstworld.com and you will find it in the navigation. We're going to take another quick break and come back for our last segment. We'll be back in a moment, my friends, with Nichole Smith. You can learn more at joyfirstworld.com. Be right back.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. Times Radio. IOM FM.
Are you ready to create and live the divinely guided life intended for you? A life not bound by your past or tied to a specific future. A life beyond your fears and what-ifs that is filled with limitless possibilities. Experiencing an empowered life of fulfillment, joy, and connection is possible when you embrace a spiritual, solutions-centered lifestyle. Through her transformational teachings and programs, Lisa Hermata, empowered Life View Guide, life transformation mentor, and founder of Love is the Seed, empowers women to break the barriers holding them back from living their sacred truth so they can find greater connection with their inner wisdom and their divine source to co-create a life that brings peace, joy, and self-acceptance. Visit loveistheseed.com for positive guidance and valuable resources to support you in embracing an empowered life view.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Hey, hon, what you doing with your phone? Taking pictures?
No, I'm asking it questions.
Like what?
Hey, Bobo, do flowers have best friends?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, follow me. I want to show you something. Look, flowers do have best friends.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Free your mind with Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I am loving this conversation about color, joy, psychology, and how colors affect us. So in our last segment, I'm really curious, what's a joy makeover? I think so. I know some people in my life that need one.
Thank you for asking. Yeah, so as I evolved as a creative, it's been really interesting for me on my journey because, as you've heard, I started as this, serial scrappy entrepreneur, and then sort of up-leveled into seeing a lot of success and credibility in what I was doing, moving countries, starting again, doing it in the UK. And along with the conversations we've had about burnout and not wanting to sacrifice lifestyle in order to have the freedom of running your own business, I think there are a lot of problematic codes and programs in our culture, which I'm sure you must talk about all the time in terms of, what capitalism drives us to. Even things like, sexism and racism have such a strong impact on our life, and in particular, our beliefs around what we're allowed, what is acceptable behavior, et cetera. And so what I discovered over the years through my work, in photography, I've photographed a lot of animals, but I've also photographed a lot of people, and in particular women. And it's so interesting, when you have a skill as a photographer, that people just trust you and relax around you immediately, you are able to see and then reflect back to them their own beauty in a way they've maybe never even seen before. And so there was always some enchantment and curiosity I had with that, sort of giving people this moment of beauty of themselves that maybe they'd never seen before. So that was probably where the seeds of the makeover were planted. But the other thing is that as I got older and wiser, my 20-year anniversary in business is in July, I, have really doubled down and zeroed in on the impact I want to have in the world, my bigger purpose. And that has, for a long time, was all about freedom and fulfillment for entrepreneurs, but it has really refined itself in this conversation around joy, because I feel like it is something we so often do not allow ourselves because it feels impractical. We feel we have to earn it, and we don't. It is a birthright. And it's also, by the way, a hack for success. It's also a lot of other things. It's great for longevity. It's obviously great for relationships. It's great for parenting. It's great for your physical health. So as I went through my journey, I sort of came to this realization that joy is the thing. I think joy is the thing we need most. I think it is something I have been uniquely created as a human being to help people pursue through a lot of different, very practical avenues, like color, like, financial freedom through entrepreneurship. And it is something that at this time we need to come together on, not only for our individual selves, but to find, community, to get organized and to feed each other's joy. And so the thing I believe is that if we can fill ourselves up, just ourselves up with joy, we are so much less susceptible to the fear. And if we're less susceptible to the fear, we don't make as many fear-based decisions in how we vote, in how we treat people, in how we run our businesses, in how we, everything. And it affects our kids, and it affects our partners, and it affects our teams, and it affects our bosses and the person we bought ice cream from. It is, as we discussed earlier, so contagious that if you can just fill yourself up with joy, it's enough. And so bringing it full circle to the joy makeover, we really focus on, color for women. So bringing color into your own life through your wardrobe, your home, and your brand, of course. And for brands, businesses of all sizes, little tiny businesses, multinational corporations, how to use color as a tool for joy, how to bring your audience joy, how to bring your team joy, how to create joyful spaces, how to be in this joy revolution. Because A, it works better for all the business metrics. B, it works better for all the people metrics. And it's the right thing to do. So joy makeovers for us are helping people and brands transition into a place where they are making more decisions based on joy, and in particular, using color as one easy starting point for that, because it helps fuel the contagion of joy for everyone around them.
Speaking my language, girl, because it is contagious. I love that word, right? Joy has its own frequency, its own energy, and I talk a lot about energy and frequency. People feel it before you ever say a word.
Yeah.
And so I always say, like, that's an energy. Joy has an energy, fear has an energy. And don't you ever walk into a place and you always know that one that has that joyful essence? You're just magnetically drawn to them. It's the same as in business, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the way I think about joy, I've done a lot of research on it over the last several years now. And I think it's on a spectrum of energy, because I think there's kind of two extreme sides of joy. On the one hand, we have that sort of not quite ecstatic, but sort of electric jump up and down, joyful joy that we often will associate with joy. And on the other side of the spectrum, we have this deep, peaceful knowing, this contentment side of joy. And when you talk to people about joy and what it means to them, you'll get a lot of different answers. But a lot of people will talk about spirituality or their relationship with God. And for them, there's this like trust, faith, and knowing that is inseparable from joy. And that's a much more calm, abiding, constant kind of joy, rather than this sort of electric, spontaneous, sort of more ecstatic type of joy. And I think both are true, and everything in between. Another way that I really like to think about joy, and this just blew my mind when I realized it, is that back to color psychology, we talked about the psychological primaries and how yellow, for example, is emotionally stimulating. So if you look at happiness, happiness is yellow. And we struggle to be happy. We struggle to be anything but happy. And when we're not anything else, we struggle to be happy. So we can't really be happy and sad, or happy and angry at the same time. And it's an emotional experience, happiness. And it's complicated, right? Because it's fleeting, and we tend to think, well, if we haven't figured everything out, if we're not quote unquote happy in our whole life, then how could we be happy, right? But joy is a different experience. And the color of joy is orange. And so, of course, orange is made up of red and yellow. So we have yellow, we have the happiness piece, that emotional piece, but it's also red, and red is physical. It impacts us physically. And so when I think about the difference between happiness and joy, you'll see a lot of definitions around like joy is happiness with more meaning, because when you dive into the research, that's how scientists like to define joy, with, this meaning. But for me, there's also this physical element that I think is really important, and that can be a very soothing or a very stimulating experience. So if you think about the spectrum of like a really light, soft orange, sherbety orange, all the way into like a bright, electric, orange, that I think can kind of describe what we're talking about in this frequency, which of course color is a frequency too, right? Light is a frequency.
Yes, it is.
And so it makes sense that it has an energy. And for me, that energy is on a spectrum.
And I get it completely, because I'm on the ladder of what you described, just a grounded connection. So as you described that second one, connection to source, peaceful, I was like, that's been my journey through joy. And that's what I embody now inside, internally, which is so important.
Absolutely.
Before we come to a close, I want to invite everyone again to please visit joyfirstworld.com. Learn more about the work Nick is doing in the world, whether you're a head of an organization, an entrepreneur, as well as for yourself. Check out the personality quiz and everything else she has there. It will pull you right in, my friends. So if you want more joy in your life or to call more into your business, please visit Nick at joyfirstworld.com. This has been such a joyful conversation. Nick, I'm so glad that you were able to join me today and share so much of your wisdom and insights. So I appreciate you, my friend.
Oh, thanks for having me, Linda. I could literally talk about this all day and all night, so anytime.
Well, I'm so grateful. And until next time, my friends, as always, choose love, choose joy, choose happiness. Blessings, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. Join our sacred space every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and meet leading female visionaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. Inspired Conversations with Linda Joy is a soulful venue where guests share the obstacles they've overcome, along with wisdom and lessons learned on their personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic and soulful living.